Uh, so I got a few things to say for sure. I was, you know, uh, looking back in history and knowing that when during the Second World War and France was occupied by Nazi Germany, and the people in the underground who fought the Nazis were called to this day. They called them freedom fighters. And I know for a fact that if my parents and my grandparents would have taken up arms to fight against the oppression of the Indian Act, they wouldn't have been called freedom fighters. They would have been called terrorists. And that's it's so unfair that the way the government officials and leaders of the so-called free world see a situation. I'm I just it's it's um it's totally hard for me to process it. Even if there wasn't the daily slaughtering and the daily massacres that are occurring in Palestine, it would be an outrage just because of the people going hungry, just because they don't have any water, and that would be bad enough. But there's bombs falling on them every day, and little kids are being blown apart. And whenever I hear uh, some of the things that the warmongers and Netanyahu's government are saying, they're calling the Palestinians. First, they were calling them animals, and then they started calling them scum, and now they're saying that in Palestine there's no such thing as an innocent. I heard the government say it just a few days ago, and then I hear people are going to be in Trump's cabinet in the United States of America. What they're saying, they're going to give the green light to do. Like Lindsey Graham, for instance, already said it about 6 or 7 months ago. He said to nuke Gaza, nuke it. He said, you know, and this guy calls himself a Christian. I don't know what kind of spiritual beliefs they have, but I don't want anything to do with it. I I I try to understand about the way it works. We're living in a country that that boasts to the world that they are all about freedom and democracy. That's what they want to promote about themselves in Canada. But but then but then they become complicit in a genocide. And whenever, because of the way some people have been raised and because of their beliefs, they're not in line with that, and they want to protest it. And whenever they do protest it, they have to fear being arrested now. They have to fear um, uh, being labeled. And this bubble area of protesting, it's that's not what's supposed to happen in a free and democratic country. I don't think it's too bad that I don't know about anybody else, but I'm not going to accept that. It's I would rather um, be dead than live in a country where my children have don't have the right to protest. That should be a sacred right to object. That's an Algonquin teaching from many, 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 many centuries ago. How important it is to have your voice heard. I think I mentioned the Algonquin teaching story of the people in the canoe, and everybody has a paddle on the river of life. And if you don't feel the canoe is going to a place of health and security, you've got a paddle and you could put the brakes on and you could say, I don't want to go there. And the canoe is going to stop moving until the people decide the course they're going to take. Uh, and I'm fed up with our politicians saying that it started on October 7th and they forget about the oppression that's been occurring since 1948. How many massacres? How much land has been stolen? You know, the one thing that Israel does not have to worry about is being brought to an area of genocide by the Palestinians. The Palestinians, it's as ridiculous as expecting somebody that throws a rock at an armored tank is capable of, committing genocide on a country that's, I guess, the fourth mightiest military force on the planet. And it's going to get worse, as bad as it's been. By the way, I remember about 4 months after this so-called war began, and I refuse to call it a war. It's just a massacre and a slaughter. But 4 months after it began, Netanyahu said that they were weeks, not months, from achieving their goals in Gaza. And that's almost a year ago now. And they're still doing it, and there's no sign of it going to let up, because no matter what the World Court says, no matter what any country says, whatever they try to do, the United States will always veto, and so will some other countries. And Canada has a blemish now that's worse, I think, than what they ever did with the Indian Act. But whenever you're part of children being blown apart, it's disgusting. I don't know how anybody with a human heart could not feel for those people. And like I say, my fear is that it's going to get worse. And the sad thing about it is people like us can't do very much about it. What are we going to do whenever there's nobody left to kill in Gaza? It really saddens me. It breaks my heart. That honestly. Anyways, it's not a good way to start, but you gotta say how you feel in this circle. And I want to say this too, that I had coffee the other day with a friend, and we were talking about Palestine and how I don't want any people of the Jewish faith to think I'm against them, because I'm not. I'm not anti-Semite. I'm not, but I am against the slaughtering of innocent children. That's what I'm against. I'm a human rights activist. I care. I want everybody to care. I'll turn it back over to you and Miigwech for listening.
Thank you, Albert, for that. The goal of the circles is to share what's on your heart and what you're feeling, and that's what you lead us in, Albert. So yeah, everything you said was beautiful. Now we're going to have Diana Ralph come on and say a statement, and because you're amazing and because of all the things you are, but also as the founder of Independent Jewish Voices, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Albert and Lindsay and all of you. I'm so grateful that this venue exists, that we have a chance to be with each other. Albert asked me to talk about the bubble ban bylaw, and I don't know how much you know about it, but so I want to put it in context. For over 100 years now, it isn't just since 1948, Palestinians have protested against Israel violently driving them from their land and oppressing them. And Israel and its supporters have also consistently tried to pressure governments to silence and criminalize these protests, just like Albert was saying. Oppressors treat the resistors as though they're terrorists. Every week since October 7th, Palestinians and their allies have held large marches throughout downtown Ottawa. They're protesting Canada's complicity in Israel's ongoing genocide and calling for a ceasefire and an end to Canada selling arms and weapon components to Israel. Israel lobby groups like CJA and the Ottawa Jewish Federation claim that these demonstrations are anti-Semitic because they're critical of Israel and because they use slogans like "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," by which they take it to mean Jews will be thrown out of Israel. I've been on many of those marches, and I know that's not what people mean. They mean free. The marches are nonviolent and well-disciplined. The organizers liaise with the police and follow the prescribed routes. And far from being anti-Semitic, I've experienced nothing but appreciation and welcome as a Jew on those marches. The city and the police are now ramping up tactics to block the demonstrations. Last December, without notice, they banned organizers from using megaphones and forced those who did to pay hefty fines. In August, after Capitol Pride issued a statement of solidarity with Palestinians, the city, the hospitals, and school boards refused to participate in the Pride March. I went. It was not anti-Semitic at all. It was wonderful. On November 11th this year, the principal of Sir Robert Borden High School included Haza Salam, an Arab peace song, in its Remembrance Day celebrations. In response, the mayor and some city councilors condemned him for using an Arab song and said that it was inherently anti-Semitic to have to make people listen to Arabic. And the school board forced the principal to apologize, and they're launching an investigation against him. On November 19th, less than a month ago, without provocation, the police arrested and assaulted several Palestine Youth Movement leaders, including my friend Sarah Mukahel. The proposed so-called bubble bylaw is just another excuse to deter us from effectively protesting. On October 30th this year, Ottawa City Council approved a motion to study whether it should adopt a bylaw modeled on similar bylaws in Vaughan and Montreal, which prohibit demonstrations within 100 meters of religious institutions, schools, hospitals, daycares, group homes, and other community venues. Bubble bylaws have been used in the past to stop vaccine protesters from threatening hospital staff and patients, and to prevent anti-abortion protesters from harassing women using abortion clinics. But this is different. The anti-vax and anti-abortion protesters actively harassed, threatened, and physically attacked patients and staff. But the Palestine protesters don't do anything like that. They don't target synagogues or other Jewish institutions. The only example of targeting a synagogue was in Vaughan on December 9th. An anti-Israel protest did take place outside a synagogue, but what the demonstrators were protesting was that the synagogue had allowed a real estate expo to function out of there, selling Palestinian land, and that's what they were demonstrating. The police didn't invoke the bylaw out of fears that it violates the Charter of Rights. So what does the Charter of Rights say? Section 2C of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms includes the right to participate in peaceful demonstrations, protests, parades, and meetings, picketing, and other assemblies. And the Palestine marches clearly come under that provision. The Canadian government instead, though, is planning to escalate attacks on free speech and human rights for people who try to protest for Palestinian rights. On December 11th, just last week, the Federal Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights issued 2 reports, one on Islamophobia and one on anti-Semitism. The Islamophobia one was quite good, but the anti-Semitism one equated being critical of Israel with anti-Semitism and included a lot of alarming recommendations, including prohibiting student encampments, banning what they called hateful speech at demonstrations, which I think if it got implemented would be any marchers who said "from the river to the sea" or were anti-Zionist would be prosecuted. And they also included recommending forcing universities to ban support for the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement and academic boycotts of Israel. I have a list of other the rest of the recommendations if you want to hear about them later. They're all awful. The latest issue of the Canadian Jewish News reported that the Israel lobby groups are pressuring Ottawa to convene, quote, an urgent national forum on anti-Semitism, hate crimes, and terrorism. And this will, I think, be part of trying to pressure the government to adopt these awful recommendations. And I find this very alarming, especially in the context of the Trump victory in the States and Poilievre's likely victory in the next election here. They both support Israel's ongoing wars and land grabs, as does Trudeau and Biden. And they also, this is in the context of complete disrespect for international law and human rights. So more than ever, we need to mobilize to protect everyone's civil liberties. As Albert said, we have to continue fighting no matter what they call us. And as Angela Davis said at the 2020 Toronto Israeli Apartheid Week, we are a part of a strong global community of people who understand that they are part of a strong global community of people, that their stance against the occupation of Palestine is linked to progressive movements against racism, misogyny, xenophobia, assault on the environment, and all efforts to make this planet a better place for us all. Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. Albert, do you want to jump in or should we go to Shaheen?
I'd like to say something. Thank you so much, Diana, for those powerful words. I know that if these people that are saying that to this bubble bylaw, these people are saying that to have special rules for protest and you got to do this and you got to do that or else you're doing something that's going to be outlawed. You know, if it was happening to their families, all of a sudden they'd change their minds and they'd say no, that's ridiculous, we can't let that happen. But they're okay though with letting it happen to people they see as animals and people that they see as scum. They don't care about that. The last Palestinian could be wiped off the face of the planet and they're not going to care. And that's just a fact as I see it. And it's too bad that people are refusing to put themselves in the shoes of the people living in Gaza, for so many months now. The seasons are going by and the slaughtering continues. And it's, we need to, get into another shift into a different gear, I guess, because we've got to let our feelings known and through protest. So, Miigwech, I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Albert. That was beautiful. So Shaheen, and I hope I'm saying that right. I also didn't clarify if I was before we started. It is now turning over to you to kind of introduce yourself, if you're okay with that. Explain Labor for Palestine Ottawa a little bit, maybe tell us what that's about, and then whatever is on your heart.
Wow, that's an amazing framing. Thank you so much, Diana, for your words, and Albert for your words, and everyone. This is such a unique space to be in. Thank you all for the invitation. Of course, you've already encapsulated the sort of moment that we're in. So my name is Shaheen, he, her pronouns. I am a member of Labor for Palestine Ottawa. So Labor for Palestine is a national organization that has chapters across the country and caucuses. So a caucus, for example, would be sort of within an existing union like CUPE or PSAC. There's groups within those unions who are Palestine activists. And so we started the chapter about actually a year ago. And as you all know, it has been more than 430 days of a genocide. So it's been incredibly difficult to sort of like build programming as we're constantly reacting to the insanity of this world and things being completely upside down. I've likened it to trying to put out a burning house with a spray bottle. And we work very closely with Palestinian Youth Movement members, including Sarah, who's an incredible leader in the community, also IJV. So I'm always floored by the volunteers and members of Independent Jewish Voices. And so unfortunately, you're seeing me today, but this work that we've done on the bylaw is a amalgamation of several community organizations, also including Horizon Ottawa. And unfortunately, Sam Hirsch was been key to all of this work. Unfortunately, he wasn't feeling well tonight, but he is very much embedded in this work. So with that, I did put together a really very, very basic set of slides just to show a bit of the community reaction to this thing that we're all dealing with. So just bear with me. As you all have said and pointed out very astutely, this is attack on our right to protest. And we have to ask, like, why are we having this bylaw now? Like, why now? And I know the example that has been cited has been the Vaughan bylaw. And on their website, they note that they are passing this in response to recent international events. And so I have air quotes in my hands because clearly this is a response to pro-Palestinian protests in the community. And I'll also just echo that we have to fight anti-Semitism as much as we have to fight a genocide. Like that is full stop. That's all of us are on the same page. There's of course a strong group of voices who want to tell us otherwise, but that is Labor for Palestine's position, that is IJV's position, that is POAM's position. And I know everyone here is on the same page. And so my first point here, and I think all of you are already here at this point, is that it conflates protests with threats to public safety. And so I'll just sort of, our identities are complex and multifaceted. Part of my entry point into this is growing up with an immigrant family in southern Saskatchewan. We were one of the only Muslim families in the entire city. And so what feels almost like, a wave, I don't even know how to explain it. The only way I can think of it is if you've ever gone rafting or canoeing, I'll say this example. I've gone whitewater rafting and it tips and the water just goes into your face. That's what it feels like constantly when we get called terrorists when we're protesting a genocide. And I want this generation, when we say in our lifetime, I mean it, in our lifetime. I'm a mother as well. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and you can probably see some of her art in the background. She knows the Palestinian flag by heart. She draws it everywhere all the time. And I've met some, and they're around my age. And when they had immigrated here to Canada, they were told, don't say you're Palestinian. And so what I find beautiful is like the next generation of Palestinian youth, we want to like say that you're Palestinian, have your flag, be proud. And I think more people in the city know the watermelon is not the fruit, it is emblematic of a flag. And I think this is huge. I think this is a monumental shift. And so it's something to expound upon. But of course, as we make gains, the power of the state and imperialism will come down on us harder. But that tells us that we're actually moving in the right direction. And so, as I mentioned, there are several groups beyond just us. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association put out an article immediately following news of this bylaw or this motion coming into place. And they've sort of said very clearly, like, look, there are existing laws to fight hate and discrimination. That's within the criminal codes. We should be using those laws and enforcing them, not curbing the right to protest at this particular juncture. And it was around the 1-year mark of this iteration of genocide. And so that just tells us exactly what's really going on here. And as already been pointed out, the bylaw seeks to mimic developments in Vaughan, Ontario, where a protecting vulnerable social infrastructure bylaw was passed unanimously. And I think to just pause for another moment, Vaughan is not Ottawa. Ottawa is the capital of this country. There are protests all the time on every subject matter possible. And I'll also say that we have existing laws to fight hate and discrimination. And as we've seen, and we could make reference to the convoy at this juncture to say, where were those laws then? There is a huge disconnect and almost a sort of enabling of our law enforcement of the convoy. And then here, and I'll also just emphasize, in Ottawa, our protests are not massive. I've yet to go to a protest in Toronto or Montreal. I keep yearning to, but here they're not. I mean, I think we bring out good numbers. That's not my point. It's the point of that They're not disruptive. There's no vandalism. They're like, I bring my daughter, there's elderly folks, there's senior folks, there's families there, there's animals, there's pets. Like it's when I go and I see people who I've been doing this work with for the last 14 months, it fills me with so much community and solidarity because I said this to a few friends at the PYM's fundraiser actually last evening that was really incredible. There is a very small list of people that I personally can sort of like talk to these days. And the ones who understand this work are the only ones that I can sort of feel sort of like at ease. I can't do the small talk these days. I just cannot because this to me arguably and should be for everyone the most important thing right now. And just on the point of land acknowledgements, I'm sorry I'm on a tangent, but there is a poster at one of the protests that I really appreciate so much. And I can't see all of your faces. Sorry, I have a weird setup here. But we have to fight genocides before we get into empty land acknowledgements. I'm not saying it the way that it was on the poster, but it's just idea that a land acknowledgement I've always taught to, and I appreciate how Lindsay introduced it. It's sort of it's supposed to be a call to action. It's not just words. And I always think words without action is not really solidarity. So anyway, this is just my first slide. I'll move on. So this, our friend, you might have heard him before, our mayor, Mark Sutcliffe. And I apologize, I don't have the date of this, but this was around October of this year. So he says there is a 19% increase in hate crimes targeting Muslim, Jewish, LGBTQ plus, and other groups in our city. That is not a statistic, it is a call to action. He's stealing my lines. No one should feel threatened or intimidated when attending their place of worship, school, community center, or any other gathering place. Of course, I agree. Our mosques, churches, synagogues, and other institutions play a crucial role in supporting some of our most vulnerable community members, including seniors and children. Of course, I agree too. They are not just places of faith, they are essential pillars of our society. So a couple things here. Again, there are existing laws to protect people against hate and discrimination at these places. And I think my next slide here, yes. So that 19% figure, it was the rise in the reporting. Like obviously all cases, hate, discrimination should be investigated to the fullest capabilities possible. And I believe this was mentioned as well around abortion access. And so, yes, there is value in bubble bylaws and other places. They're called a safe access zone. And so in 8 provinces in this country, those exist. There is federal legislation to protect access to abortion services. Sorry, it was more healthcare services in 2022. And that was as a result of anti-vaccine protests. And so there is value in having these bylaws 100%. And I think something that Sam Hirsch, if he was here, would point out much more eloquently. He had sort of pointed out this really, how do I put it delicately, extremely frustrating and annoying. Also false comparison with protection of LGBTQ places and also abortion access. And so to suggest that we, the collective we, in fighting a genocide or somehow attacking those spaces is preposterous. And anyone who would want to believe that, I'd love to talk through the logic behind this because it's designed to divide us. And right now it's really all of us versus a genocide. It's not Jews versus Muslims. It's all of us versus this thing that is happening on our phones on a live stream basis, day in, day out. And yes, as I previously mentioned in the Vaughan bylaw, if you go and look, they have a frequently asked question on their website, which is quite handy. And so they cite recent international events, which is just laughable and shameful, and also tells us that these bylaws, these motions, should be easy to deconstruct, and which is why conversations like this. So I really appreciate, I'd love to have these with everyone across the community because each and every one of us has a voice and has power, and I'll get to what we're going to try to build on towards the end. And some other just reactions and tweets on this. This is Rabbi David Mivaser, I might be pronouncing that incorrectly, who was active at the action that was on the Hill. I missed it. I was very sad about it a few weeks ago, but he says, protesting support by religious institutions for an act of genocide is not anti-Semitic and should not be criminalized. If you cared about, quote, vulnerable communities, you'd advocate for an end to the mass murder of Palestinians, not suppress those who do. And this person, Ryan O'Connor, I believe is a lawyer based in Ottawa, and he says, just because Vaughan adopted unconstitutional speech-free zones doesn't mean Ottawa must follow suit. The criminal code already prohibits property damage, violence, and interrupting religious services. We don't need new laws. Police just need to enforce the ones in the books. And so this also tells us, and I think we need to use this when we're sort of confronting our elected representatives, that there's an absence of leadership right now where we actually do need strong and clear voices for an issue that I think has been made overtly complicated, and it actually isn't. I do not think you need to know the entire history of the Middle East to understand that, as many posters have said that you all have seen, bombing children is not self-defense. All of us have seen the stat that children between the ages of 5 to 9 are the highest demographic of those being martyred in Gaza. And so yet, and I think, Albert, you put this very well, it was a concerted effort to sort of criminalize Palestinians from birth. This notion that Hamas is everywhere has permeated our domestic and foreign policies. If we used to think there was a division between what is domestic and what is foreign, I think right now we are seeing that things like this bylaw, is bringing the global into the local. And so that should be raising alarms. I should pause if anyone actually wants, again, I can't see you all, but if anyone wanted to like comment or say ask anything, please feel free. And I believe this. Oh, sorry. Go
I was
ahead.
going to say Albert might be jumping in. Yep.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'd like to say, Shaheen, that I wish I had your eloquence and your well-spokenness and making a point. I really think that a lot of what you said, it should be, this is all being recorded, but we should post some of your words on the website. And I got to say, that if it was Algonquins who were doing to the Palestinians what Israel is doing, I would condemn them, and I would be in their faces, and I would be ashamed that people of my bloodline were capable of the slaughter of innocent children. And we need to, at election time, before election time,
Yep.
We need to organize ourselves to get the word out there in ridings where the voice of the politician is pro slaughter and pro genocide, and vote them out. We got to at least try to vote them out, and to let the voters know that it's more than just an ethical or whatever decision. This is connected to spirituality, in my view, because whatever anybody's spiritual beliefs are, they need to understand that if they don't object to a genocide like this, that there's going to be a reckoning someday. Because everybody's going to die at some point, they're going to have to answer for what they were part of, or what they were okay with, and I think a lot of people really forget about that there's spiritual consequences to not objecting to babies being blown apart. Anyway, that's how I feel. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Albert. Exceptionally well said, and I could not agree more. I do feel like things like this should keep us up at night, and it's not meant to instill a notion of guilt or anything, but it's more responsibility and an obligation. I really struggle with the notion of complicity in all of this. And as many organizations have made clear, our tax dollars, our pension funds, money paid to universities, it is channeled. And as a really good comrade and I have discussed, even if there is one penny going to this, we have to make a big deal about it. And I would hope to, I appreciate the notion of, being a good ancestor, and we can sort of take a stand on this. And there are so many more iterations of imperialism that affect communities in our city each day. One thing that was mentioned, the arrests, that was, I believe it was December 18th. And that protest was designed to be a walking tour. I had actually, and like you, there is this every weekend almost, well, there has been a protest every weekend. And I won't say I've been to every single one, but I am at quite a few. And that one in particular, I think I had a dental appointment, was home, didn't feel great, was behind on work. I thought I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna say hey, but I'm gonna go back to my office because it's nearby Elgin. And as I was there and I was leaving, I thought, it's a small group. The police will leave them alone. Small group. It'll be okay. And that was the night of the 4 arrests. And if you recall, it was the day after that our mayor and councilors had a very nice welcoming sort of rally for refugees. And again, I felt like I was screaming inside, because one way to support refugees is stop the genocides that cause refugees and stop the conflict that create communities of refugees. And so the disconnect is real. This slide here that I have is another post that was on Reddit. And I can't recall when this was. It was probably October, November. There are various groups in the community that work together to fight a genocide. Everyone has a shared goal, but sort of like different ways to get there. And so you might have remembered that there was a protest at the Soloway Jewish community that just from an optic, maybe sort of media lens, didn't hit, or people didn't understand what was going on. What people did extrapolate was there were people protesting against Jewish seniors. How dare they? That is a watered down version of the interpretation, but that's the sort of like loudest voice again that got the most appeal. And I think this says it quite well, that in Ottawa, the Soloway Jewish Community Center held an event to promote Canadian citizens traveling to Israel to support the IOF and Israel's illegal occupation. There was a protest against the event. Predictably, pro-Israel commentators angrily responded on social media, condemning without context. And so I'm sure, I'm sure that is something that if someone was to just look at that without understanding why the protest was happening, that would absolutely raise alarm. So yes, the motion did pass 22-3. And just to clarify, it was a motion for the bylaw. It's not actually the bylaw per se yet. And the 3 councillors who voted against, Sean Menard, Jessica Bradley, and Sean Devine. A few of you might have even been there, but through Labor for Palestine, we did try to organize a group of people to actually go and attend the city meeting just to see the vote, though a lot of us knew kind of what the outcome was going to be. And so in terms of like next steps in a timeline, this is all kind of work that we do on the side, on top of jobs and caring for family and other commitments. And so we do have a coalition, and I believe it was also mentioned that there was tickets issued for megaphone use earlier this year. And so there was a Defend the Dissent coalition that was brought together to sort of like push back on this. I can say there was at least $20,000 in tickets that were given to people at protests. Some of them included Joel Harden, a lot of the key organizers at that moment. And so also around that time, the timelines are all a blur. Through Labor for Palestine and Independent Jewish Voices and PYM, we developed a community defense fund that has since been proven very useful given the slate of arrests recently. And so following the 4 arrests on December 18th, there were additional arrests on the 23rd and the 24th, and so 6 in total. I just got a message about an earlier arrest earlier in the year. That case is sort of finally coming to a close. And so you can just see like a lot of us would rather not be spending time at the police station trying to get our friends, community members out of jail for things like this. It is incredibly time consuming. There's a lot of actions that we organize where, yeah, arrest is a possibility, but it's never the goal. And just for the simple act of protesting, that is a charter protected right. One should not fear getting arrested for going to a protest. And so, just going back a bit after the sort of slate of arrests and police sort of telling protesters that we couldn't use the road, we had to use the sidewalk, and all of this that I had never heard in this entire year. And again, it's not that I've been to every single protest, but I have been to quite a few, and we are part of the community coalition that does organize them. I had never heard police say to us that there's not enough people, you have to use the sidewalk. And so there were the two arrests where there are two protests with arrests. And then the following week on December 1st, we actually had a labor protest that was really just meant to sort of bring out union members, which is the purpose of Labor for Palestine. And I remember getting there thinking I must be so naive thinking we won't have arrests today. But sure enough, there weren't, which just, I'm happy about it, but it also just drives home the point of how absurd the prior arrests were. And if you line up, another timeline I could have prepared was the timeline of the arrest and the budget that was just passed from the city and the OPS getting their increase. And so thankfully, December 1st, there were no arrests. It went fine. We had a really good group. The following, just this past weekend at that protest, a little bit colder, but also we had a really great group. People are still coming out because people have not forgotten and still want to protest and make their voices heard. This was the first time that I had seen that we announced that we do have a legal observer team when we're planning anything that's more high risk. But this was the first time they went to the microphone and announced, if you are arrested, here is the lawyer, here is the number. And this is what it's come down to, and maybe we should have been doing this months ago, but I bring my daughter, I see people with their kids. This is not something that we consider high risk. It's a protest, and at every single protest, there is someone who will work with the OPS. They are often not very easy to work with, but we do it in order to sort of like cooperate and collaborate. And you'll hear successively, they'll sort of pin it on us that we're not collaborating or we're not willing to work together. And it's just another layer of the absurdity. So, in terms of the timeline, we launched digital action a few weeks ago around the time that this was being introduced. We got a really good turnout. And now what we're trying to think through is that since council has directed staff to do a report, we're sort of trying to get community groups together to organize meetings with their city councilor. And as Albert pointed out really well, it doesn't matter if there's an election. I mean, we should be advocating for changes like this anytime or all year round, rather. And so the next iteration is kind of sitting in my court. We had a template letter that we were giving to community members, and now we sort of need to like up the ante, knowing that we really want more community support behind the push to not have this bylaw come into force. And so the next step will be trying to urge people to organize those meetings with their city councilors. We expect the staff will release the report sometime in the new year. I really don't know if it will be February. We'll try to find out as much as possible. And then, of course, it'll go to committee and council to vote. And so I've heard anecdotally, there are a few councilors who have openly struggled with this. When it comes to the vote, they'll vote against it, but we don't know. And so it is a matter of really having those one-on-one conversations with your councilors, but also with your neighbors, your coworkers, people, because if we sometimes feel there's this big thing happening so far away, but this is a tangible action we can take that does have impact. And I think if we can sort of do these things, it is on us to take advantage of the avenues we have. Admittedly, there are two members of the Labor for Palestine chapter who did speak at the latest city council meeting. They written an op-ed. I'll find the link and share it. And they sort of outline how ridiculous it is, the process to speak before council, and that not all of us have all day to sort of wait around to talk to counselors. It's very inconvenient. And of course, that excludes a lot of voices that do matter and could could actually speak to issues like this. And yeah, so the next step, we really want community-led pressure on this. We'll be releasing a survey to sort of ask people if they would like to meet with their counselor, because we're hoping to have like a group, like a small group, not, I mean, bigger is always better, but groups of people to go together to meet their counselor, because I know this is not something people think about or do every day. And we want to build a toolkit so that you're sort of like ready and you have your like fact sheets and key points to sort of refer to when you're talking to your counselor. And again, as Albert had said, we have to push. There's 3 that voted against it, but that's not to say there's others who were sort of like challenged by this. Our kind of assumption is that they will follow the pattern that was taken in Vaughan, and we'll see the same thing here. And I could be mistaken, but I think the fine in Vaughan, if you violate the bylaw, it's either 10,000 or 100,000. It's something just absurd. But that's kind of where we're at. I think that's the last one I had. Sorry, I sort of like talked at all of you, but yeah, I'll pause now to hear all of your thoughts and reactions.
All right, that was amazing. Thank you for that. Albert, do you want to jump in first and then I'll kind of get to the comments?
Okay. I liked everything that Shaheen said. I want to make something clear, and that is during just to give an example, whenever the the city of Ottawa gave the green light to a developer to develop an Algonquin sacred site known as Chaudière Falls, but known to us as Kikojuan. So when the struggle went on for about 4 years before the West Indy and ZB began their construction of the condos, but over that period of time, I was asked 3 or 4 times to go to different churches to present the Algonquin spiritual connection to that site, and then leave it up to the parishioners of that church to decide who they were going to support. Now I know that no such thing probably could happen here, where somebody like Shaheen or somebody like myself or whoever, Nadia or whatever, to go to a church and speak about what's going on in Gaza to Christian parishioners. I don't think that they would allow that, because they'd say that it's against, it promotes hatred or something like that. They'd have an excuse. But just the same, though, I'm well connected with some clergy in Ottawa, and I'm going to talk to the Christian leaders that I know and see what might happen. Like if there's a possibility at all that their parishioners could hear both sides. You know, if somebody is pro slaughtering and pro genocide, let them go and speak, but let somebody who's against it go and speak too, and then let the parishioners decide who they're going to vote for. That are whichever city councillor is okay with this or not okay with it, and how are you? What does your heart tell you to do, or what do your spiritual beliefs direct you to do about it? Anyway, for me, it's a simple thing, and I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. But I'm definitely going to start putting the pressure on the clergy that I know to get involved more. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Albert. Shaheen, did you want to respond to that?
I was trying to look for a link. I believe the United Church of Canada has called for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, which is huge. And so absolutely. And yes, I was sort of laughing a bit. I recently just tried to pass a resolution for an arms embargo at a union event. And so I was not in a good mood because it did not pass for a lot of reasons. But the notion of let the ones who want the genocide just speak. And I almost regret someone called the question for the vote too soon. And if someone had got up, there was one person who spoke and it was going a bit off. You sort of like, it's almost like when there's an inappropriate joke and you ask, why is that funny? So you put them on the spot and have them sort of, yes. But thank you for that intervention, Albert. I think there's a hand.
Yes, except we don't unmute participants. As a general rule, to keep
Oh,
everyone safe. And it breaks my heart every time. But if you can write it in the chat, I will read it. That was just how we set it up at the beginning. But I can catch up with some of the chats here while you're doing that, Sandra. Okay, so where were we? A comment about I have never been at protests in Ottawa that have as diverse participation as the pro-Palestinian ones. Babies with their parents, old people, youth, all races. It's incredible. It is difficult to understand how and why these places of worship or gathering places break federal laws inside or participate in illegal, dangerous behavior, as we saw in Vaughan, selling land, and in Ottawa, recruiting for a foreign army. Oh yeah, and then the council meeting was so frustrating to sit through. The councillor who proposed the bubble bylaw high-fived the councillor next to him when he saw it would pass. The intervention from the legal observer team was really good, worked well, I think also because the police were listening. They're being forced to listen and it's made a difference, at least with the protest this past Sunday. And then the question from the hand up, what about Knox Presbyterian Church within 100 meters of the Human Rights Monument? Has anyone spoken with the minister there? Yeah, because Sandra could. So Shaheen, I don't know if you want to.
yeah. Just two things. So funny enough, because of organizing and having these conversations has been so hard to come by. We've existed largely on social media, and so I created a Facebook group to get a wider audience. It is still social media, but there's so much weird stuff out there, and I just didn't go looking for it, but it popped up on a feed that one of the convoy supporters had sort of taken a selfie inside a church saying, now with the bubble bylaw, we can do anything in here. I'm paraphrasing, but it just sort of shows that it's sanctioning certain types of protests or what have you, and then of course criminalizing others. And just to the point on the church near the Human Rights Monument, I think also, you've highlighted an excellent outcome of this bylaw that we wouldn't be able to even have the protest beginning at the Human Rights Monument. It's really, you can't make this up. Like this is not a Beaverton article. This is real life Ottawa.
So I think we should follow up on that, definitely. That Sandra's saying she could speak to them. She knows them, have worked with the churches. That's great. Thank you all so much. I know that many United churches would be very receptive to hearing from any of you. I was part of Emmanuel United before I moved to Moncton, New Brunswick. Beautiful. And then, yeah, that Knox Presbyterian is right at City Hall too. Probably.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. What do we want to do another round? Albert, do you want to jump in again with something? What do we?
No, I'm just happy the way things are going with this meeting. It's really, really special one.
Okay. Okay. Beautiful. Yeah, so getting the toolkit for the church. So Shaheen, do you have the toolkit ready already? Or were you saying you were working on it?
This is the thing. We launched the action to sort of take a position against it. Of course, we sort of realized that this ship has sort of sailed a bit in that the motion has passed. They've directed staff to produce their report. And so for myself and Sam and PYM and IJV, it was just like peak craziness time in the last couple months. And so We didn't get a chance to sort of do sort of a phase two that would be directed at city staff. And that was some advice that we got from one of our members who works for the city. So given that, we still want to push trying to get a meeting with your city councilor and actually have those one-on-one conversations. And so that's what we're trying to do. Let's say, for example, you send an email now, maybe you could get something in January, and then by then we will have like the toolkit with the talking points, the key messages. There was mention of maybe having a website. I don't know who's going to have time to do that, but we'll try. But that's just it, to just keep the pressure up. And I've thought this, feel this, and feel like it's relevant here. As much as we are pushing an end to a genocide, the voices, the forces, the money, the budgets to sort of facilitate and enable the situation are much greater and much louder and much stronger. And so we do need to broaden the network. And I actually do think speaking with churches is a really good avenue. I really hope that this issue that we're facing in the city with a bylaw that really encapsulates a global issue right now can be made not as scary to talk about, and sort of like not a thing that's way over here, but something that is impacting us here. And I would argue everyone in this community wants to live in a city that is welcoming for newcomers, immigrants, refugees. If we want that, the other side of that coin is sort of like battling the conditions that result in immigrants and refugees coming to places like Ottawa. And again, like we're not a massive city, we're a small community. And again, when I see folks at the protests on the weekend, it does feel like it is such a small community. And so there's a lot we can do with a small group of committed people. And so all of you are obviously an example of that. You've been hosting these circles for long before I just sort of popped up. But yes, I think my kind of goalpost is to get a toolkit kind of ready together, also translated in French as well, ready for community members to actively use, hopefully in the new year. And of course, as things become more ridiculous, we also have a Drop the Charges campaign right now that has reached 80,000 letters, I think, amongst the community, which is really excellent. I personally don't have any indication that they will actually drop the charges, but this is sort of like in labor negotiations, often things happen at the very last second. And so we still want to keep the pressure up. And we have seen a case in Toronto where charges were dropped against someone who was violently attacked by police. And so with the Ottawa situation here, there was a ton of people who have lots of video, lots of recording. And so these charges should not stick. So all that is ongoing, however.
You're beautiful. So aiming for January meetings, I think that is a good target. I will work on that and can probably do it for my city councilor here. Another comment was, it's surprising that many people still don't realize that there are Palestinian Christians, especially in Bethlehem, who are also living under Israeli apartheid. The same as Muslim Palestinians.
There are entire Christian Palestinians, family bloodlines, lineage have been wiped off the map. And so that often doesn't get pointed out enough. And one thing too, and I don't know if it's within the purview of like the Harmony Circle, but if city councilors do attend something like this, that would also be really great, so that we could actually have the conversations. And I want it, like all of us want this to be a conversation. We don't need to like force you into a position. This is really, it's about this bylaw, but it's about sort of an unthinking of anti-Palestinian racism that is happening left, right, and center. And I think there's important conversations to have about how it includes Islamophobia, but it is quite distinct from Islamophobia. And one thing that might have already been mentioned that the city is adopting, also this country is adopting, is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. I think Diana put it really well, that of course, one of the most damaging aspects of it is equating anti-Semitism with the critique of a state. It would be sort of like critiquing Canada makes you somehow anti-Christian or something like that. Seems ridiculous. And so that should tell us that this definition is extremely problematic, but it's justifying a lot of the response that we're seeing in the city. And I mean, Ontario adopted it in 2019, so it's not, again, it's not new by any means. It's just taken on a bit of a fervor now.
Okay, we have another comment. I think yeah, that's the next one. Infiltrators and agitators are taking bolder risks. Some are paid to give video to those with certain agendas on their social media.
I think that also became quite clear in Montreal not too long ago with the broken windows and everything else that happened there. Um, yeah. And I think it's fair to say in the protests in Ottawa, there are undercover police. When you see, always a few people that just look that you don't quite fit here. And so they're obviously trying to get information, which is really why I really appreciate, I think someone said this too, Yasmin's intervention at the last protest to never speak with police. It is so important because they will try to get anything out of you. Incidentally, I do find this hilarious. One of the police liaisons is one of our followers on Instagram. It's his personal account. And so, of course, they see what we're doing all the time. But again, like for Labor for Palestine, our work is not meant to be high risk. We're not out there breaking laws. We're literally just saying we need to respect Palestinians and stop a genocide. And labor has a role to play in that. I know I didn't really talk a whole lot about that, but I do appreciate this comment. And we take sort of our cue from what workers did under South African apartheid in the 70s and 80s. And so that was a clear example where workers sort of like took charge, refused to handle goods, mail from South Africa, but it wasn't automatic. Labor had to be pulled. And so we're in that situation now where it isn't automatic. A lot of unions have come out and called for a two-way arms embargo, which is excellent, have called for a ceasefire, also excellent, but we still need more. And so actually getting people out to the protests and seeing the value of it is a challenge we're facing right now because of course the sort of CJA Jewish lobby is also trying to tell us that unions should not have a role to play in these global issues, which I don't know where they're getting their script from, but unions have always played a role. That's why we call it a global labor movement. Many unions have social justice funds that fund worker-centered programs around the world. And so this is not new. And so it's just another sort of thing that makes me think of the one of the seven stages of colonization is justification. And so what like the Jewish lobby, the CJA lobby, the Zionist lobby is trying to do is just justify what's happening, not change anything, which is extremely alarming.
Oh, you're teaching us. Thank you. The next one was, I will contact my city councilor and other councilors I know and send a message to them, all telling them to vote no on the bubble bylaw. Also, I'll try to get my synagogue to take a stand against it. Really appreciate the strong voice of labor. Coalitions are so important. And then a question, are there ways for general public to support labor for Palestine? Also, where do you recommend folks send donations?
These are such good questions. Our focus, and we're trying to sort of stay in working with workers who are unionized. And incidentally, we had a workers' town hall for International Day for Solidarity with the Palestinian people. But a lot of the questions were from non-unionized folks, so people in the private sector saying, you know, what if I speak out? What do we do? So Labor for Palestine does have a legal referral program for that. And it also, weirdly enough, I'm hoping it sort of pushes people who are unionized into gear because what Workers in Palestine is an organization. I could share all these links with you after the call. They've sort of asked us to sort of like take risks, be bold. We're not telling you to go out and lose your job. All of us need jobs. All of us have families, but if we have more of a cushion, there's a bit more that we can push and do. And so to answer that question, as a chapter, we meet monthly. It's typically the last Tuesday of the month. So for January, it'll be January 27th or 28th. And if you have like an event and we can have a table, please invite us. We can come and talk about our work and what we're doing in the community. So that's also really helpful. In terms of donations, there's actually a few things one can do. I mentioned that the Palestinian Youth Movement had a fundraiser just over this weekend. That's not us, but they're fundraising for relief efforts in Gaza. So I can also share that link. That is one. And of course, I mentioned our Community Defense Fund. Given the 6 arrests and the tickets, we are still fundraising for that. We don't want to be fundraising for that, but it seems to be something we're forced to do. That's something else that we could definitely appreciate community support. And we've already been overwhelmed with support from the community. We've barely had enough time to actually like market it properly. But the support that we've gotten has gotten us this far. So I'm happy to find those links before this call is over, and I'll pop them into the chat.
You can also send them after, and I can email
Oh, sure.
all the participants. And then we do have a vision that somewhere we have all these put together as well. I had a Google
Sounds good.
Doc. At one point, I can update again and just keep it as a Google Doc for now. Because again, who has time to make a website
Yeah,
right now?
I hear you.
Yeah, so we can just do it very basic like that. The next one, December 10th, is International Human Rights Day. It would be good to remind the city councilors that Israel has broken almost every one of the rights, and Canada had signed as one of the countries that follow international law. And with the ICC declaring that Israel is committing genocide, the mayor and council should be reminded of that. And question, do you know the city councilors that may swing their vote for the official bubble bylaw vote, trying to figure out who is best to target for public pressure, as I have time to lobby in person? So Diana
I
had said
could
Ariel Troster, Teresa Kavanagh are among the most progressive councillors, plus Joel Harden, who was just left to run as federal MP.
Yes, for city councilors, so that was one thing to go. We had sort of had a conversation about mapping city councilors to find out exactly who's most amenable. And then we sort of concluded that it doesn't matter if they're more on side or totally in opposition to us, we still have to sort of like send the letter, call for the meeting, make the political point. And so that is a good point. I'll make sure that's sort of encapsulated within the sort of like toolkit we're trying to put together. Yes. Jeff Leeper is also my city councilor, and I did not get a response to my email, though I have not had a chance to follow up. I do think there is an opportunity here for people who are really struggling. And I've heard there's councilors who sort of have, the biggest Jewish community in their riding, but it's also a huge opportunity. Again, my sort of my disfavor with trying to pass an arms embargo resolution that failed. Like, yes, it was on me and on us to sort of have the education and awareness, get all the facts out there for people, but it also is a matter of leadership to sort of like take a position. And we're seeing, and I think I already mentioned this, an absence of taking a position. And so I still want people to be able to make, if they're going to vote for this bylaw, be clear on what they're voting for, and then we still hold them to account. And I think even if this thing doesn't get voted in, our work does not end. Even if we, get an elected leader that is totally on our side, we don't stop. Like we still have to push these issues. It doesn't stop because our Labor for Palestine sort of ethic, and I think in this room too, is that change comes from people. Leaders won't willingly always do the right thing. I don't know if we've ever seen that. They have to be pushed, sometimes kicking and screaming. But we want those decisions to have the full backing of the community. So if we can sort of say at the end of this, we had, I don't know, 300 community members meet X number of city councilors, that would be a win either way how this goes, because we are still trying to build more mass support that's fighting against the genocide than a population that is okay with the status quo.
And then last comment. Ariel Trotter made a comment at the meeting about how she's benefited from those who have protested for LGBTQ2S+, but as a Jewish person, she voted for the bylaw discussion. I'm still confused how the religious affiliation of a city councilor influences her votes. Are they not representing the constituents?
I think, yep, I was there when she said that, and it was a letdown. I see Diana shaking her head. I asked myself, who was Ariel talking to? Who was her audience in that moment? Who was the constituents she was really speaking to? It certainly wasn't us. And so, yeah, I think that is someone who has responded, and I believe it might have been this action for the bylaw, but she did have a lengthy response. Of course, these are all just form responses they're saying, but at least she did that. And so for all of us, this feels like so black and white. There are people who are still struggling with this. And so in the labor movement, as we get sort of more into this work, my approach, and it's the same with all movements, we have to meet people where they're at. Of course, that doesn't mean that we accept disrespect, doesn't mean that we expect to go backwards, but we do have to actually engage people to have these conversations, because the worst thing that could happen is this gets voted down, but then the next city council introduces something that's worse, you know? And so it's sort of a broader consciousness raising piece. But I appreciate that point, Marianne. It was confusing.
Yeah, Ariel is actually pro-Palestinian. She may have voted yes so she can intervene during the debate, or hoping that their lawyers will say it violates the charter. So something I just read, and I can't remember when the article was from. It wasn't a new article. It was about Ariel saying that when the anti-trans protesters were outside of that school, she stood, you know, creating a shield so the children didn't have to see that, and that was one of the most frightening things she'd been involved in. But what you said before was where there were rules. Could that not already be declared hate speech under like current rules?
Yes.
Okay.
That is almost, if you think of a bit of a parallel, that notion, and I now you're reminding me, when I heard that, I was like, oh, for God's sakes, Ariel, it's sort of also collapsing that experience with bubble bylaws around abortion providers, which are good and positive. And I think for the anti-trans protesters, they could have been shut down. They were discriminatory, they were hateful. That really could have and should have been shut down a lot sooner than it was. And again, we can't sort of make, and I'll be careful here, we can't sort of make sweeping legislative changes based on, you know, like pockets of experience here and there. Of course, as counselors, they have to sort of like listen to their constituents and also the broader collective and what is happening. I don't know if you've all heard the name Carolyn Parrish, but she was the mayor of Mississauga. She is the mayor of Mississauga, who has a brilliant tweet that I would tattoo on my forehead. But she had opposed the increase in the police services budget and actually stepped down from the police services board in Mississauga in defiance of the increase. And then contrast that with the city of Ottawa, where in this last weekend there were barely any officers because they got their 5-year contract. And I think the year one was 6 or 8% increase. And so they got what they wanted. They had their show of force over the last few weeks leading up to the budget. I mean, this is all speculation. I'm not an expert on this, but it's really hard to not see the absurdity in this. Yes, yes, she's great.
And on that note, it is 7:57. I know we do try to wrap it up at 8, so I'm wondering, are we good to Albert? Do you want to come in to close? Is it a good time? Shaheen, do you have anything else you want to add before?
Oh my gosh, no, I talk too much. Thank you so much for your amazing comments and listening. I really do appreciate this.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I think Albert will come in and close then. Although we could talk forever still, but
Yes,
yes.
yes, we can talk forever. It was an amazing meeting, one of our best ones, and I hope everybody that I see on this call, I hope I get to meet you at some point. If ever I'm doing something in Ottawa, and you please come and say hello if you see me there. You know, the pro-Palestinian movement, Free Palestinian movement, is up against a powerful, insane force. Whenever, and proof of that is whenever powerful politicians in the United States of America, like Nikki Haley, who such politicians went to Israel and they autographed 500-pound and 1,000-pound bombs. They put their name on it. They knew these bombs were going to be dropped in Gaza, and they knew that these bombs were going to blow children apart, and they still did it. So what kind of a human being does such a thing? I don't get it. And that's who we're up against. People who they're spiritless and they've got cold hearts, and they will do anything to acquire wealth and power. I think we need to get advice from people such as, I don't know if you know Larry Russo, but Larry, I don't know if he's retired now, but I know him very well from my activities when I was helping out with union activism. I haven't seen his name around in about a year and a half, but I'd like to. I'm going to talk to Larry about what his recommendations might be on how to get our voices out there more, who to contact and when to contact them, and whatever we need to do to be more successful in our cause, and so that people understand just how serious it is to be living in a time where a genocide is occurring, and we need to take it seriously because there's consequences. And I guess with that, I will say to everybody, have a good night, and God bless everybody. May Creator bless each and every one of you and your families too. So good night, everybody.